Welcome everybody. I am Ruben and you are listening to After the Master, a weekly podcast in which I talk to people primarily from the international student community who have recently earned a master's degree from globally leading programs and are now on the path to achieving their professional goals. My guests delve into their experiences and highlight their mistakes, learnings and realizations, which I am sure will help you move closer to your career goals. I post a new episode every week, so please subscribe to receive updates. The journey to success is seldom straightforward and easy. In today's episode, Mridula talks about her story from practicing law to enjoying researching the political ecology of zoonoses in India. She is a postgraduate researcher at the University of Northumbria and holds an MPhil in Developmental Studies from Oxford University. She also talks about what helped her receive the prestigious Inlaks Scholarship. If you would like to listen to this episode, please see the description for a link to your favorite app and stick around till the end to gain as much as possible. I would love to hear from you, so please connect with me through the link in the description.
Ready?
Hello. Yes.
Hello. Hi, Mridula. Thank you so much for coming on my podcast/show. I think there will be a lot that people will gain from listening to this episode, I would say. So before we begin, could you please give just a little introduction about yourself, and feel free to go as far back as you like.
Okay. Yes. First of all, thank you, Ruben, for having me. And I think this podcast/show sounds really promising and exciting, and really fills like a gap that I really see in our whole education system overall. So yeah, I'm very happy to be part of it. About myself, so this is really how I would. So this is the brief version, which is that I'm a lawyer by training. I studied in ILS Law College in Pune, and then I started practicing at the Madras High Court. I started with a corporate law practice, then I shifted to a law practice, which was primarily environmental law, with also some general civil and constitutional work. But I think after which, I guess in a sense realized I just didn't have the kind of stamina it required to be a practicing court-going lawyer. And I realized I wanted to be more on the research and, the non-profit side of things. At least I wanted to explore that. So the first thing I did really was take a short-term internship with a member of parliament. This was a member of parliament from one of the Himalayan states in the Northeast. And so I worked for 3 months with him, which was a great experience because I really wanted to understand policy making and how it sort of, what is the other side of it, not at the level of lawyers who are sort of implementing it or contesting it, but how it's made. But more importantly, I think rather than understanding nitty-gritties of policy making, that really just gave me exposure to a whole other world out there. And the fact that there were different options and possibilities and things I could do with my law degree outside of just practice. So then there was a 1-year fellowship which put young professionals in selected NGOs across the country. This was a fellowship which was run by Chirag. It's an NGO in Uttarakhand. So they sent me to Keystone Foundation in the Nilgiris in Tamil Nadu. And that was the time when the Forest Rights Act had just been notified. And so I worked on the environmental governance part of the work in Keystone, amongst a bunch of other things. And I suppose during the course of that is when I realized a real lack of, I didn't really have knowledge of research and how to do research, because that's not stuff that you're taught in a law degree. And also my grounding in terms of social sciences and all that was very limited. So at that point, I felt like, that's when I started applying for master's programs, and that's how I got into that space. So where I decided to do a master's in development studies. But yeah, that's about it.
You did an MPhil at the University of Oxford in Development Studies. Is that right?
That's right.
And
That's
I mean, you kind of answered your motivation to do a master's, complete a master's. But before you, went to the UK, you must have had a certain kind of perception about, as an international, as an Indian student, what you could expect from a master's in the UK, and you probably even had a career goal after doing a master's, and maybe that would help you get there. So could you discuss a little bit about your perceptions before you went and how maybe that changed while you were there?
Yeah, sure. It's actually, the thing is, it was a little topsy-turvy for me because I honestly had no idea what I was getting into. Because I guess that kind of support system didn't really exist in India at the time, because I went for my master's in 2011. And so all I remember is just having this Oxford dream for many years. Like, so around 2006, a year before I passed out of law college, I remember, and then years before that, just hearing my seniors in law college talking about, oh, they're going to apply after the LLB, they were going to apply for an LLM in Cambridge, in Harvard, in this place. And I remember thinking, what, like, we're allowed to apply to these places? I didn't, till then I didn't even know that was possible. So it just opened up this, this world for me, saying that, so it was just this dream idea. Honestly, I had no idea what it really involved. So I started an application process right when I was leaving my undergrad, but then that just stalled. But like I said, this whole process through which I realized that I did actually want to do a master's, then I started reading up. And in fact, I had advice. So I didn't even know, for instance, what should I be studying? Like, what do I study in order to get this knowledge that I needed about social sciences and things like, so what program even am I supposed to be looking at? So I remember asking my friend's mother, who's a development economist at the Madras Institute of Development Studies. And she and her guide, who, is a very senior professor. So they it was very nice of these very established people to take a little time out to explain to this completely clueless, young person that, what is, like, where do you, okay, so what other areas you're interested? Okay, so you're looking at issues of poverty, underdevelopment, and you want to understand more about that. Then, the kind of courses are, you can either do economics, but to do pure economics, you need to have had economics in your undergrad and math, which I didn't have. The other option they said is, so there's something called development economics, which is a little broader, but still it's more economics focused. And they suggested that development studies is a better option because it didn't only focus on economics. It also had some anthropology. It also had some history and politics, and a few other electives. So it was great for someone who came from one kind of specialized background, but got exposure to a bunch of different fields. And so that was the advice I got in terms of not blocking myself into just economics or just one field, but like a sort of a multidisciplinary course like development studies. So that's how. So I then I just started looking at colleges in the UK, because the US had more restrictions in terms of GRE and things like that. So I remember just sticking to the UK and Europe, and looking at colleges and programs which had very well-rated development studies programs. And Oxford was one of them. I also applied to SOAS, the School of Oriental African Studies, and I think Institute of Development Studies in Sussex. I think The Hague also had, I think, Institute of Social Sciences, I think it's called. So I shortlisted these places, and that was it. I genuinely had no idea. For me, just getting in to one of these programs was the goal. And I honestly don't think I thought of anything after that, really.
I think that gives a lot of clarity about, your mindset before you went. And you had also applied to the Inlaks Scholarship. Is that right? And a lot of people apply to the Inlaks Scholarship and very few do get it. So what was your approach? What helped you in that process?
I think so at that time when I'd applied, I remember when I started applying, I realized that I had just missed the Commonwealth scholarship deadline when I first decided. So I was already feeling quite upset that that deadline had passed. And in fact, I was really wondering that should I just defer the whole thing for a year and, start applications next year. But there was something in me which was just telling me, just apply and let's just see. So Then I think, just speaking to others who had gone abroad to do their masters, like seniors from college or, other colleagues, just finding out what kind of scholarships are available for this kind of a program and these kind of things. So Inlaks is one that came up. In addition to, I think, Aga Khan Fellowship, which I also got shortlisted for, the Felix Scholarship, which also I got shortlisted for. So it's really through word of mouth and just general Google search that I just found out what. So I made a list of scholarships. I looked at what the relevant criteria were to see whether I matched it or not. And then, deadlines and things like that. So I just had a chart in which I kept track of these things. And the Inlaks process is that you submit the first round, which is the application in which your CV and, your SOP, things, why you want to do what you want to do. And I think it really helped for me that I was just really naive and honest at that point about, I want to change the world. And I think that really came, and I genuinely thought that at the time. And I think that came through in my application. So the next thing that happens in the Inlaks process, I can't remember the timelines anymore, but that they, they let you know if only the shortlisted people the long-listed people rather, will get notified.
Okay.
And then once that's done, they call you all to an interview in Bombay. And I think there's no funding for that portion. You land up in Bombay on your own. You go through an interview process, an interview panel, which is about 3 people from your field. So if you've applied to study development studies, experts in those fields will be there. Or if you apply to study law or engineering, you'll have experts from those fields interviewing you. So, so I interviewed with the panel, and then is the next round is the shortlisting round. So then you get told that if you've then moved into the next round, which is the shortlist, which is, I think, about 30, 40 people. And that's when you go to the second round of interview, which is it's a big panel, which is about 12, a jury of about 12, who sort of sit all around you, like in a semicircle. And you might see some famous people there when you walk in. And so you then sit there and, and explain to them. It's not one of those interviews where they're trying to grill you to figure out what you don't know and try to put you on a spot. Right. I found that it was a process where actually they wanted to know what you do know and what you actually want to do and were interested. And, it wasn't trying to catch you on the back foot kind of thing. They were genuinely curious and probing and asking questions. And I think it's about really knowing your CV inside out, your past experience inside out. So if you've said you've done such and such a thing, you better know it really, really well. They can catch you if you're faking or if you've extra glossed. Better to be completely honest. And I think one thing that really helped is, I think when they asked me this question about what exactly are you going to do when you come back? Yes, you have this plan of, working with indigenous communities, this, that, and how are you going to exactly do it? And I remember at one point, after asking a couple of times and the questions got more and more detailed, and I said, I don't know exactly. And that's why I'm going to learn. I don't know exactly what needs to be done. Yeah. And I think they appreciated that, that the candor. And so I think it was, and so then after this big interview is when then you get the final, I think in my year, I think it was 8 people who were finally selected. Okay. So that's the process. But Inlaks is a great scholarship. It is tough for sure. But once you get through, they really take care of everything in terms of your flight, your accommodation, your tuition, but also even the fact that they even have they want you to go there and study, but they also want you to experience the place. So there is also a small travel grant for you to travel in Europe, for instance. They invite you to France as part of the, you meet all the other fellows that year. Got it. So it's a scholarship that's quite well-rounded in that sense.
Hey, that's nice. Yeah, that's good to know. I'm sure a lot of people will. I know personally quite a few people who applied, but they couldn't get through or whatnot. But one interesting point you mentioned earlier was that you were in an interesting place where you didn't really know what you wanted to do in the future. Of course, you wanted to come back and work with indigenous people and taking forward the Forest Rights Act. I suppose in that space.
Yeah.
And a lot of people that I talk to, they are also, they don't really know what to do afterwards. So when you did go to Oxford, when you started your MPhil, what really helped you, focus your attention towards a role that you wanted to get into after you came back?
I think the first big, I would say the first big shock really was just understanding how knowledge and learning is very different in that context from anything I was used to earlier. Because in at least in the law, in law universities and colleges, you're just, what you learn is, this is the law, you learn it, and then
there's a lot
exactly.
It's rote learning,
just
basically.
Yeah, and so this idea that this is what it is. But then when I went there, I think right from week one, this whole emphasis on what do you think, and I remember just being, confused, and it was actually really. It took me a while to develop my own sort of critical voice and reasoning, because from so many years of, just saying, this is what the experts say, to actually thinking, okay, this is what the experts say, but the other experts also say this, but what do I think? Building on these things, not that, you just stand on a podium and just say whatever you want, but it has to be based on existing research and stuff. So I came to re-examine a lot of ideas I had about, I'm going to save the world, and I will just go do this thing. And, in India, when I go back, I realized, for instance, a lot of work that has already happened in the field, how difficult it is to actually do this kind of work in a developing country context. What are the challenges? What are the constraints? So I think it gave me a big reality check in one way, through reading the other people's work, the literature, the theory, the case studies, and all of that. So that was one part of it. But I think the big chunk also of the MPhil is that you have a fieldwork component. So you have, during your summer break between the first and the second year, you go do a few months of fieldwork. And this is not obviously as extensive as PhD fieldwork. It's like a few months duration. Okay. But that also gave me a sense that it's, again, so I went to Pench National Park in Madhya Pradesh to work, studying a community, sort of community-involved wildlife conservation project. And so I think some of the realities of the sort of the grandiose ideas I had really got shaved off in the process in terms of what I wanted to do. And I started having a more realistic vision of what I could potentially do.
Right. So what I understand, from you, knowing you, I know that you have really good communication, both written, verbal communication skills, and I'm sure your law degree must have helped you. Plus, of course, I know you after you came back, but a lot of people have told me that, it's very important to talk to people, network, in any field, regardless of, which field you are in. It's very important to continuously build your communication so that you can just get to, it becomes easier to, build relationships with people, both professional and otherwise. Do you think that helped you during the masters? And also, at what point did you start thinking about what you wanted to do after you finished your masters? Was it, so I suppose you came to India for your field work. Were you able to build, a network with people in NGOs, in organizations during that time, or afterwards, or something before you went there?
Okay. Yeah. So for me, it didn't, I don't know. This is really something I say, and I don't want to say this in a very discouraging way, but I think for me, a lot of the networks I built before I went for my master's. So for instance, the work I did with the member of parliament, the work I did with Keystone Foundation, I think all of this were my network building, stages. Okay. So when I went to my master's, it was particularly with these older institutions. I mean, your Oxford, Cambridge, the emphasis is on theory, conceptual frameworks and things, and which was great because I got to learn that side of things. when I wanted to do fieldwork, and I really, really struggled. And I felt like there was not really much support from the university in helping me figure that out. And it was really the people I knew from before who stepped in at that point. And they were the ones I reached out to help me find my field site, to help me. So, and even I think that really stuck with me because, at that point when I was finishing up with the master's, I remember thinking there was the option to continue on to a PhD. Not an option really, you have to apply to continue on to the PhD, but the PhD process is a lot shorter if you've just finished the MPhil at Oxford. But I think I was, I realized, that maybe academia was not my thing. Like it was good for me to get the background and experience, the sort of research training I did. But I wasn't sure if full-time academia was something I wanted to do at that point of time. And yes, I think in terms of networks, I don't know if I made a conscious attempt really, but the thing with a university like Oxford is your peer group is fantastic. So everybody is inspiring, everybody has done great work to get to be there. So, when you're constantly surrounded by impressive people, then it sort of elevates your own level, your discussion, the discourses that like the kind of discussions you have in classes of another level entirely. It sort of pushes you as well. And so, so I think that helped, that helped, though I don't think it necessarily translated into connections and networks on the ground in India for me. Not really. And again, it was really in terms of when I wanted to find work, I really struggled for some time. And again, it was the contacts, the people, the networks I'd made earlier before I left for my master's, which again came into use, and not really anything, through the university networks at all. Although I'm still in touch with my batchmates from, we are all actively in touch and, all of that, but it's not really translated into anything for me, in active work terms.
That's quite interesting. And, contrary to what a lot of people believe is, probably this may differ by, country and also the kind of institution that you are in.
Right.
The Oxbridge community may be a little different from the rest. But what I would like to know from you is, so after you finished your master's, your MPhil, what kind of opportunities were you looking for, and what kind of a job did you get into, and also how did your training at Oxford help you in your work afterwards?
I think my idea of when I came out was something with an international NGO. I thought, straight away the UN would be waiting for me. Yeah, I would have a job. I just needed to say, hey, I'm from Oxford, and that would be it. I have, dismayingly realized that was not true in the least. Yeah. A lot of, in fact, so initially when I had just finished, I had, because my partner at that time was based in Vietnam. So after I finished, I moved to Vietnam for a year. And so initially my job hunt was in Vietnam, was I was looking at a position that was in Vietnam or somewhere nearby, Thailand and this and that. So I realized that so all the positions that I was applying for, so there was these, I think it was called CFOR, the Center for International Forestry Research.
That's, I think, Indonesia, based in Indonesia, if I'm not wrong.
Correct. Yeah. I think CFOR, I'm not sure. One of those organizations.
CIFOR, I think that is one. Yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So I was applying to them. I was applying to other organizations, which were, international NGOs that was doing forestry related research, because, coming from an environment, having that whole environment, the interest in environmental issues and environmental governance. But what ended up happening is that I found that in a lot of positions, either I was overqualified or I was underqualified. Okay. So either if they needed a position, either they needed somebody who was very junior and who could speak the local language, or they needed somebody with 25 years of experience, plus a master's or a PhD. Yeah. And so either I was in neither category. I was junior to mid-level with a good master's degree, but could not speak any of the local languages of the Southeast Asian region. So I was just really sort of, I think I spent a lot of time just being stuck and really frustrated that I couldn't find anything. And so then eventually I decided that, I'm going to also start applying in India. In fact, at that point, I was, getting so worried that I also started applying to, corporates, which were like, for instance, doing audits about, environmental audits.
Okay.
Checking if they're environmental compliances, or if they were a company that procured timber, whether all the relevant environmental regulations were being met, even though I had no training in that. And that was really not what I wanted to do as well. But, I think when you're desperate and then you just start applying to any and all sort of things. So none of that worked out. Eventually, like I said, it was the MP that I worked with earlier, who again, when I had said that, listen, I'm looking for something in India, he's the one who again put me in touch with the organization that I started working with next. And this was based in Dehradun. So that's when I found that position and moved back to India. So it wasn't a very sort of fairy tale journey post, my master's at all. It was actually quite a bit of struggle. And it took me a while to really find, I had no answers as to what I really wanted to do, but I think I sort of figured that out during the years that I worked after my master's, really.
I think people have the assumption that a master's would, or at least, like the label of a really good university would give them a bit of a boost. Maybe it does in some cases.
Yeah.
But a lot of people find themselves in the situation that you were in.
And I just want to also say that this is not such an India-specific issue as well, because I know in my MPhil program at Oxford, quite a few people who went back to positions that they were in.
Oh. So, but once you did start your work, right? So probably you had some expectations of compensation pay, kind of a bump up from what probably you were earning before. So for those, looking to enter this field, what kind of pay could they expect? Do you have any such insights?
I have examples from my case. I don't know how it applied. The thing is, mine is not a great example in the sense that because earlier I was working as a practicing lawyer, which you get paid very, very little. Then I did internships, because I was sort of shifting fields. I did internships, and then my work with Keystone was again as a fellowship. So again, it was a stipend and accommodation they took care of. So there's not really, I can't really compare it to say, what was my previous salary to what it became.
Okay.
But I know that when I started with the new organization the one I joined after my master's, the first job that I took up, paid me 50,000 a month, which wasn't really what I thought. I thought I would have earned at least 20,000 more than that.
Okay.
But I think at that point I was really, really worried because it had been, I think, about 8 months or something, and I hadn't found a job. And I think that position is something that I would have got regardless of whether I had an MPhil or not. Because like I said, I got it through people I already knew at that time. But I think it was during the course of doing that job that I think everything I learned in my master's started filtering back. And I think in a sense, so there was a lot of, report writing. It was a policy advocacy body. But then, just the fact that I was able to go through research to formulate the reports, the policy briefs and things like that. I think it gave a real solid academic grounding to the work I was doing, which I couldn't have done without my master's. So it definitely played I don't think it worked out for me like financially and things, but in terms of the kind of quality of work I was producing, I could definitely see a difference.
Right.
And I think then it was sort of, I could then build on that to further develop myself. So yeah, that's how it worked for me personally.
Excellent. So since then, since you finished your master's, which is when you kind of stepped into the realm of academia, to now, as a PhD student, what would your advice be to such professionals?
I guess to make sense of it for me, what happened is that after I finished with my previous organization, I did 2 years with the organization, and then through somebody I knew from there is how I got to know about an opening in the organization I worked for a longer stint with afterwards. And the thing is, working with with an NGO in India which was working on environmental issues. It was perfect for me because it was finally what I really wanted to do. But also from, so this was a research organization where I had access to the research, not that I was personally doing research myself. My role was sort of translating the research into, trying to see what the policy connect was. So to ensure, in a sense, to see environmental policy in India has a good research grounding, it has a good grounding in science. So that was what my position was in the second organization. But during the course of that, because I interacted with researchers working in the field of environment on a number of issues, on a range of issues, I came across, so even political ecology, for instance, although I was broadly aware of it, I really came to understand it through the work of the researchers I met at this organization. So everything that you talked about in terms of, the networks, the communication, the connections I made, all of that happened for me in this, in the organization I just worked for. So, and I worked there for about 4 years.
Okay.
And then, and the thing is, I think the idea that, that I need, having a PhD, a couple of it is just practical reasons. There are certain positions in many organizations which you can't reach without a PhD. So there is the practical so that the practical consideration was definitely there. So I'm not like only in it's just not stars in my eyes for academia by itself. Of course, that is changing in many organizations, but it's still very much there in a lot of places. So I didn't want the lack of a PhD to inhibit my further career progression. So that was definitely one part of it. But also what in the course of the last couple of years, I started working a lot with a few of the researchers. So we had a project with a few of us who was in this organization and a few of us in an international organization, where these ideas of zoonotic diseases, that is diseases that spill over from wildlife to humans, like COVID, the idea of One Health being sort of this global policy about how to tackle zoonoses. And so, I started working on this and working again with a very multidisciplinary team. There were public health doctors, there were environmental researchers, there were ecologists. And, it started really interesting me as well. So when there was a call, I strangely found out about this position on Twitter. There was a call put out by a lecturer in the University of Northumbria saying this position, there's a role for a PhD scholar to do this.
Yes.
And I applied, and it was sort of it worked out well. It was so I think, like I said, aside from the practical consideration, there was also I was really curious about this topic, and this is an area that really began to interest me. I began to read widely about it. So I think there's also that curiosity, academic curiosity as well. So which is why I think, as opposed to my MPhil, now I'm actually really enjoying research because I feel like I'm getting into a question that I'm really curious about, and I have the space and the time to explore it at the pace I want to. So I think that's how it worked out for me. So I was just saying that in terms of what I can tell other people, all I could, I think, possibly say is that find out what really interests you. And I think what really makes you happy doing, and not, for the, just for the sake of it. And like I said, practical considerations are always there, but find something, a topic or an area that really aligns with you and that sort of excites you to do. And then the whole process, I think, is a lot smoother.
Yeah. Makes sense. I can relate to since we work together, I can kind of relate to what you probably were going through in terms of, entering academia and what interests you, what not. I also pretty much applied to PhD programs for the same reason that, at some point in my career, if I am in research, it needs to be there, whether I like it or not.
And none of this is fixed. I mean, you can always change things. I think that's what I realized through this entire journey of, through my career, is that something when I found that, my advice is not, my point is not to say just give up if something gets a little hard. That's not what I'm saying. But if you find that in the core of you, you're really miserable doing something, then find a way to change it. As long as that's possible. I know in a lot of situations, if you have responsibilities and others dependent on you, it's not possible. But if it is, I just feel like, we're always told from a very young age that make your mind up and then stick to it and all of that. And while that's good advice, it,
doesn't work out always.
No, not even close to what reality actually is. Because at the age of 17 and 18, when we decide that, we want to be a doctor or an engineer or a lawyer, we have no idea.
We're barely adults.
So
I
think, and it's also important to just tell people that you can always change things around. You can go, but the thing is, may have to start from scratch again. You might have to start with an internship and something and, build up again, but it's still possible. It is possible.
Yes. So, if you take yourself back a few years and probably maybe just after you finished your law degree, if there was one piece of advice that you wished you had received at that time, would it be this, or would it be, this by this, what you just mentioned, or would it be something different?
I think I would just let myself go through what I went through, because I think there was no substitute for what I, just like I said, just feeling stuck, just feeling miserable, wanting that change. I think that gave me the drive to push and want to change things. And I think if I had been told this, I don't think I would have understood. And,
at that point,
I think I needed to go through, sometimes, you have to go through these tough times, difficult phases to actually give you the drive as well. So I think I'm glad I went through it the way I did.
Great. Going into a slightly different direction. Is there something that you've been working on in terms of self-development for yourself? It can be related to your career. It can be something else. Is there anything of that sort?
Yeah, I think I've always been a very anxious person. I've always been a very worried person. And I think for me, one of the biggest thing is to not, let's say, worry myself into a place where I'm, my own enemy in a sense, So I think I faced that at different points. For instance, during the MPhil phase where I couldn't find a field site, it just wasn't working out. I think the anxiety about it really stopped me from being able to think clearly. And I was just like, I'll do this, or I'll do this, or I'll do this. And I think for me, something that I've learned in the last few years is the importance. I know it sounds really like old fashioned, but meditation has been a huge thing for me in terms of, just listening to you, just nothing fancy or, complicated, but just something like just mindfulness, sitting and listening to my breath. And this ability to sort of, when I'm in this very anxious place, to soothe myself, to have these techniques of self-soothing so that I can sort of bring myself down to a position of centeredness and then take decisions about what to do and, how to proceed. And I think, and I'm sure that's also making a huge difference in my academic journey between the MPhil and now. And I see myself in a much more in control, much more sorted position now. I would attribute a lot of that to what meditation and what that has done for me.
Oh, I 100% agree. Even I think I've also included a short meditation practice every morning. It sets a really good direction to the day, your mood and whatnot. It just affects a lot of things. And I've heard this from a lot of people. And there's a book that I'm reading. It's called Tools of Titans, in which a person, his name is Tim Ferriss. He interviews a lot of big people, famous people, and a lot of them talk about meditation as a tool that they used in their career at some point that helped center them, and has led to success. More people should get into the practice of meditation.
Or give it a try at least and see, for sure.
Yes, I mean, there are, when I first started, I gave it a try. I thought, okay, I'll sit for half an hour, 20 minutes, but of course, starting with 30 minutes is probably not the best idea. You can start with 1 minute, 5 minutes, something like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So to finally conclude this session, one question that I like to ask people is what they think of as being successful. So what is your take on that?
I think, that is a tough question, but I think, it sounds really silly, I guess, but I think the idea of success is that, my idea of success at least, is that I feel at peace with what I'm doing, that I'm excited by it. Every single day when I wake up, I'm excited to do what I do. And that it pays me a good amount so that I'm comfortable financially.
Yes.
And that, that I don't have to worry about finances, because if I'm worried about finances, it doesn't matter if I'm doing, for me personally, I'm not saying this works for everyone, but I need to be financially stable so that I can, my mind is free to really focus on my work. So I think, so for me, I guess it's not about, hitting a certain number in my bank balance or something, but it's about having enough money to make me feel what, the kind of life that I'm used to sort of maintain that, while also exciting me and while also bringing me in contact with people whose work I find exciting. So, there are people who I bounce off ideas with, and having access to, whether they're colleagues, whether they're, other researchers, or whatever the work situation is, but having a group of colleagues who intellectually challenge and stimulate you. I think these are my ideas of what is success.
All right. Thank you so much, Mridula. It was great speaking with you. Maybe in the next season, we can talk again about your PhD work and what you're doing in that space. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Mridula's experiences are truly inspirational, to say the least. As she said, sometimes you just have to go through the ups and downs to realize what is good for you. If you would like her guidance with anything, please reach out to her on LinkedIn. I have added a link to her profile in the description. If you are planning to apply to graduate programs abroad, I offer several services and I am working on a bunch of resources to help you breeze through the applications, which are on my website rbnedu.com. You'll find links in the description. I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful. If you did, please share this within your network and subscribe to stay tuned. Thank you.